Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Chief Learning Officer Breakfast Club. A little less talk, a lot more action, sharing actual use cases of AI in simulation learning. I'm Ashley St. John, Chief Learning Officer's Editor-in-Chief, joining today's event from just outside Chicago, and I'm so pleased to welcome everyone here this morning. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor of today's event, Ability. Ability offers award-winning leadership development programs, business simulations, and virtual mini MBAs to organizations of all sizes. Ability's experiential learning offerings embrace the power of play and have impacted more than 100,000 learners in more than 50 countries around the world. With more than 100 Fortune 500 clients, Ability is a rapidly growing leader in the leadership development and executive education market. And we are so thankful for your partnership and your support of today's Breakfast Club event. We'll kick off our opening panel discussion for the day momentarily, where our panelists will be talking about simulations and use cases of AI in simulation-based learning. They'll be answering as many questions as they have time for that come in from our audience. So I, as always, encourage you to share your big questions and your comments in the chat as well. We absolutely love an engaged audience, so please feel free to join in there. Following the panel discussion, we'll hear a fast talk from Luke Owens, Vice President of Product at Ability, which will dive deeper into some of the pieces and elements of this conversation. And Luke will also be joining us for our panel discussion in a few moments. And finally, we'll conclude today's event with an interactive discussion and audience polling session, where all attendees will have the opportunity to share some of your perspectives and experiences related to AI and simulation learning. During the full event today, please drop any and all questions into the Q&A. And of course, we encourage you to connect and share your thoughts in the chat as well. I will mention that a recording of the event will be sent to all registered attendees following today's session, as well as a transcript of the chat, a post-event survey, and certification codes. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists for our discussion today. We're joined by, as I mentioned, Luke Owens, Vice President of Product at Ability, Tim Gillespie Jr., Managing Director, Academy Executive for Operations Enablement and Technology Strategy with Bank of America, and Gorish Wah, Global Talent Management Lead for Credit Suisse. It is actually Gorish's birthday today, so happy birthday to him as well. And we'll let each of them share a bit more about themselves shortly. And finally, I'd like to extend a big welcome to our panel moderator, Rob Lauber, CEO and founder of XLO Global. XLO Global is a consultancy and advisory business designed to drive strategic value for business and workforce development efforts. Rob works closely with venture capital firms, startups, and high-growth companies to drive innovation and scale with their solutions in workplace learning. Rob is an industry-recognized leader with more than 30 years in leading learning and talent functions in large-scale enterprises. Previously in his career, he was the Chief Learning Officer leading frontline to C-suite learning at McDonald's Corporation, Yum Brands, and Singular Wireless, which is, of course, now AT&T, and impacting millions of lives around the world. He's also held learning leadership roles at Coopers and Lybrand, which is now PwC, and Dun & Bradstreet. Rob has been recognized multiple times by CLO magazine for his work, including being named the CLO of the Year in 2013 for achieving business impact, leading business change, learning technologies, and global learning. And Rob is also a member of our Chief Learning Officer Advisory Board. So we're so pleased to welcome you here today, Rob. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to pass things over to you.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate the introduction and have a great panel here today and excited about, I think we got about 80 people on this session. So hopefully we can deliver. I know in our sort of pre-call prep that we always do to make sure we all know who each other are and what we're going to talk about. We had some really great discussions. So I'm hoping we can bring that forward today. And talk a little bit about what Garish is doing for his birthday. So we'll make sure we plug that as much as we can as well. And appreciate him being on this evening for him. So despite his background, it's actually very well into the night where he is. So really excited to have you all here. I wanted to do a couple things first. Obviously, we'll do the go around of have people introduce themselves, and then we're going to bring through a couple of questions that will hopefully prompt some great discussion for all of us. And then towards the end, we'll open it up for the Q&A. So as questions are coming into your mind along the way, please use the Q&A button in order to be able to make sure we can get to those in our queue. That'll be the best way to do it. And again, time permitting, we'll get to all of them or any of them, or we'll make some up if we have to. So please join in and make a participatory, there's the word I can't say, as opposed to actually just watching and standing by. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what we're talking about as well, because we learn from that also. Okay, so let's start with, I'll pick on Tim Gillespie first to introduce himself. If you could just share a little bit about, where you are, obviously what you do, and maybe also what your audience what your audience is that you serve for the most part, and then a little bit also about sort of your organization in terms of how you're functioning in person, remote, hybrid, still figuring it out, whatever it might be. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and it's great to be here with everybody. Gosh, I couldn't think of a better birthday present than to be on this panel with you today, but it's great to be with everybody. Tim Gillespie, located in Boston, Massachusetts. I work at Bank of America. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Academy, which is our global training and development organization. We serve 200,000 employees around the world. I've held a variety of different roles at the bank. I actually started as a financial advisor, became a field leader, ran some strategies for Merrill Lynch, and then eventually made my way into a training and development role. We today are operating in a little bit of a dual environment. So we do deliver a lot of our trainings virtually, but we are still bringing employees together for trainings that really are best suited to be delivered in person. So it's a very unique environment that we've all been through the past several years, but we're kind of figuring out the best way to operate in the new world order.
Yeah, part of it being a bank, you kind of have to have an in-person component, right? So
that's right.
People still want to talk to somebody. So it's great. Thanks, Tim. Let's go to Garish and talk to us about what you're up to.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for the warm sort of wishes from everyone. It's really exciting to be here on my birthday and to be with such wonderful people. I work with Credit Suisse. My role here is mainly is a part of the talent management and change team globally. I've been with the bank for close to 4 years now, and really the focus is how is it that we can use technology, introduce the concept of digital learning, really, sort of focus on adoptions. That has been some of the focus areas. I come with a diverse background, which is I've worked with Accenture for close to 10.5 years, and then with Sodexo, which is into food services and facilities, for 5 years. So it's been a little diverse experience, sort of unlike Tim, which is really tons with a rich experience in the banking industry. And yeah, I've been mainly focusing on organization development and leadership development throughout my life. Sort of pretty much a learning and development professional. Very passionate about it. Yeah, I mean, the organization, it's I think post the pandemic, there was a fair amount of research surveys that was sort of compiled together, and we work in a very hybrid environment right now, though people are quite still sort of choosy in terms of working from home or coming to office, but that's coming of age. But yes, when it comes to the bank's front office, which is the investment bankers and relationship managers, they sort of pretty much started working from the office environment, sort of pretty much in 2021. So yeah, it's a bit of both between the front office and the back office. But yeah, we are sort of getting there as we move forward. Thanks for having me here.
Yep, glad to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And Luke, let's go to you and talk about what you're up to.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob. Can you hear me okay?
Great.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm Luke Owens. I'm the VP of Product at Ability. We run mini MBAs and simulation-based learning for clients all over the world. So last year we had about 35,000 learners, and I have the privilege of actually getting to build our products. We do heavily synchronous simulation-based learning around topics that managers and senior directors need. And then we really try to create environments in which they can practice, practice, practice. And that's really where my background comes from. I was an athlete in college, so I love practice, unlike Allen Iverson, Tim. I know we all think about that practice. But then I also was a teacher. I taught at undergrad for a while before I then moved into the corporate learning space. And so it's been a long journey to get here, but I'm so happy to be part of Ability, where we actually get to bring the best of simulation learning to our clients. We historically were in person, but COVID changed us all 2 years ago. We talking about practice, Michael? I see some good chats coming in. I love it. Love the reference, Wayne. But now we're about 95% virtual, and we deliver them to clients all over the world. You'll hear all about our stuff later. I'm going to give you a peek under the hood of our simulations during the fast talk. But for now, Rob, thank you for leading the panel, and I'm excited to be here with you, Tim, and Gordon.
Yeah, no, Luke, thanks. We're excited to looking forward to the fast talk and talking more about Ability later. And again, thanks for sponsoring as well. Really appreciate that, because that's how these things happen, which is lots of fun. All right, so let's get things started. In this conversation, we're talking about AI and simulations, and I think one of the big questions out there is when we talk about use cases for AI and simulations, one of the big questions is when we're talking about simulations, simulation-based learning, what do we really mean? Because I think that there's lots of mental models that all of us have around VR, AR, classroom-based simulations, whatever it might be. I'd love to get your thoughts across the board and sort of help our audience context set for this conversation when we're talking about AI in simulation-based learning. What is it that we really are talking about in your context, which might be different across the board? So let's start with Garish. Maybe you can talk about it from a Credit Suisse perspective.
Sure. I think firstly, that's a great question, because when you say simulation, it could really mean anything. It could be just working with use cases. It could be offline. It could be online. It could be using generative AI. That's true. And I think that is still evolving to a large extent. So when we say AI in simulation, it really means focusing on a specific problem that you want to solve. So for example, let's say if you want to build a risk culture in the organization, basis historical data and experiences that you've had, things can, we can use sort of build simulation learning to help in taking decisions, in avoiding risks, or let's say, for example, mitigating risks. And it could work really at a very fundamental level. It could be applied to the junior level or the front level employees to really create awareness, but also at a senior level where they are given simulated environments with quite predictive outcomes that they can use to take decisions, identify those risk levers, and I think these are some areas that we can definitely use, and I've been trying to use that in the organization.
So pretty diverse, application in terms of opportunity across Credit Suisse. That's great. All right, cool. Thanks. Tim, how about you at B of A?
Yeah, so to me, when we define AI simulation, what we're really talking about is delivering immersive, personalized experiences to our employees, and what we call the moments that matter, right? So those critical experiences that they will have, a manager to an employee, or an employee with a customer or a client, and giving them the ability to witness that experience, practice that experience, to Luke's point, practice, before they actually engage in the real life scenario themselves, giving them the confidence, giving them the proficiency to be able to, effectively be successful in their role.
Okay. And then just to that context, does the delivery matter? I mean, in terms of delivery type, when you think about that?
So I think it does. I mean, where we've seen the most success has been leveraging what we call our iCoach AI simulation platform. And so we're delivering these simulations through this immersive technology platform. But I think what's really incredibly important here is this high tech plus high touch human engagement, right? Because where we're seeing the biggest benefit for our employees is the ability to be able to witness, experience, practice, and then have that followed up by a manager or a team leader, mentor, et cetera, to really drive the point home.
Yeah. Okay. So good balance of both. Great. Thanks, Tim. How about you, Luke?
I love what you just said there, Tim. There were so many words that I just call out, right? There's the immersion and the experiential nature of this. We're actually in that moment that matters, right? There's this practice orientation to it that I can actually try it out before it's actually high stakes when I'm in there. I think the two that I would add on top of it when we think about it, and we come at it from the lens of managers and senior directors, is there's a feedback orientation to it, right? After that practice, you get to know how you did and in some way actually change what you're going to do the next time, whether you practice again in the simulation or step back into the real world. That feedback part is really interesting in the context of AI in particular, because there's an opportunity for more personalized feedback that historically was held back only for those with an executive coach in a very soft setting. So this practice leads to feedback. And then the last thing I would say from a simulation to your question, Rob, that we think of as core to simulations is some sort of social environment in it. And whether that social environment is you're going through it by yourself and you're knowing how you do relative to other people, some type of benchmarking, or whether that social environment is you're going through it with other people. And it's clear that adults learn really well when they're problem solving things together, right? And so when we look at this simulation environment and we come at it from the synchronous simulation environment, we really think this immersion, this experience, this practice, this feedback, and this social piece are so important, because then they set the stage for personalized AI feedback. They set the stage for personalized personas of those practice, personalized moments that matter. And I think that's what I heard from you, Gorish, and you, Tim, that getting those moments that matter right is really important.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and great insight there too. I think in terms of how people are thinking about it, and then how it's being used in organizations as well. I know those things, particularly the social learning piece, I think is from my own experience, has been pretty important in terms of really tapping into the ability to learn from others, right? And learn from your own experiences. And I think simulations definitely present the opportunity to do that, at least in the traditional sense. And now I think, AI is really supercharging that in terms of, definitely getting more personalized, but also allowing us to be a little more sophisticated and reach a lot more people in terms of what we're trying to do. So let's get into that, since this is about a little less talk and a lot more action, right? So sharing actual use cases. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how you're actually leveraging AI and simulations as part of your greater strategy, and some of the challenges that you see. And then maybe if you could incorporate some specific examples, that would be really helpful for our listeners today and our participants here. And now we're over 100, so it's great to see that. So I'll just open it up. I'm not going to call on anybody directly. I'll who can step forward and kind of give us sort of how you're using it in your greater strategy, some challenges you see, and then some sort of specific examples would be really great.
Rob, I'm happy to jump in here and get us started. So I know I mentioned that we leverage a platform called iCoach, which is delivering our simulations. We have over 1,200 simulations or stories, if you will, right now that leverage AI. We'll have close to 1,500 by the end of the year. Very focused on those moments that matter, because it's our strong belief that our ability to deliver these simulations in a way that's going to help our employees retain information and practice and develop proficiency is important. And what I mean by that is, we're not delivering 30-minute simulations. We're really delivering, I would call it more of your quick hit, call it 10 to 15-minute engagements to really hone in on that particular skill or experience that we want them to be really strong in. In terms of challenges, the list is probably pretty long, which is not surprising for a financial services company. I think we're subject to something like 20,000 different laws, rules, and regulations. So needless to say, doing things with integrity in the right way is of the utmost importance. And AI is very new, and AI means different things to different people. And my own personal perception is I read more about the risks of AI in today's day and age than I do about the benefits of AI. And so I think there's a perception that's out there, and that professionals like us have to really work through as we talk about strategy, implementation, et cetera, et cetera. So You've got a risk component to it. You've got a newness of technology component to it, which is hard to get employees comfortable with something that's new, that's outside the box of what they've delivered before. But obviously talking about the benefits is really important to us. But where we have used this to be really effective, I'll give you just a couple of examples, right? In terms of the stories that we're delivering. We're trying to do things that enable our leaders, our managers to be more effective. So helping to deliver simulations to them that will allow them to coach their associates, have difficult conversations, which is not easy to do for everybody and takes time and takes practice. We are trying to prepare our employees and associates for experiences that they're going to have in their day-to-day. So that could be difficult conversations. How do you have these types of conversations with a client or a customer that comes in and is really upset about a fee that's happened, or a decline that they've experienced, or client doesn't meet credit expectations and we're declining an offer, et cetera. All things that until you experience and practice, you may think you can read and learn how to do it traditionally, but it's best served, really experiencing and practicing. And then overcoming objections. The reality is, for many of you, I'm sure, that are on the line here, there are components of the roles that we support that are sales oriented, and objections come from those experiences. And so how can we prepare our employees for those objections that they may encounter and allow them to practice how they can overcome them? So, I could go certainly deeper here. There's so many more use cases, but that's where we're really finding tremendous impact.
Yeah, it sounds like sort of the overarching strategy, if I translate maybe a little bit, or my interpretation is really trying to make sure people can practice and learn, not at the expense of the customer, right? So, the time to learn how to handle an objection is not in the middle of a sale, right? And and those time how to communicate tough news to a potential customer about creditworthiness is not in the middle of that conversation, right? So I think that those are some really great examples that I think people can think about, and those widely apply. I remember thinking about those at McDonald's, in terms of we get an order wrong, which invariably happens. How do you handle that customer? How do you calm that customer down? How do you sort of settle down that type of piece? Or how do you help, from an engagement perspective, practice on engaging customers in conversations? So super helpful. Yeah. Great. Hey, Garish, how about you at Credit Suisse?
I'm just gonna add on. I think Tim just threw some like some really big numbers. 1,500 or 1,500 simulation. That's quite a lot. I think we're nowhere close to that. But I think it's just getting started. AI is definitely new, but I would say that the way that we're using it is perhaps on two different levels, if not three. One is on focusing on building strong cultural values, because like a few years before, we looked at revising our cultural values, and really the focus is on two of the many areas. One such is building a risk culture, which is really important for the bank over a few years, and we've used simulations to help build awareness in employees. Close to 55,000 employees worldwide, which again are looking at things differently, where they're organized, where the national culture, the team's culture changes quite a lot. So that's really about creating awareness. Likewise, the other focus area is about speaking up, because when we're looking at identifying risks and mitigating risks, it's important to even raise those risks. So simulations help in terms of giving them various scenarios that are very intuitive, and then when employees click on in terms of what would you do if you're giving a choice, and then they end up getting like little red box saying, no, you're not supposed to do that. So things like even like fraud detection, things like that questions your integrity, which is so important. I know it sounds fundamental, but that's exactly is the core and really the root for for us. So there's been a lot of work in that. The other thing, I think that that's what Tim mentioned in terms of use cases, in terms of improving conversations with our clients and customers, and that's really getting started. We're not really into the thick of the things so far, but we're working on that in terms of providing simulated environments where we have a safe space for having those conversations, especially for our relationship managers, which is really crucial. And there has been a fair amount of investment and interest from our leadership team in terms of identifying more such scenarios that we can use for immersive learning. And we also believe in, doing a lot of practice. I know that we use simulations in various onboarding training as well, which means that, employees who are just getting started or new to using simulations, let's say AI-based simulations, get introduced right from day one. And this is across all career levels, be it junior or senior sort of career levels. There is intent in terms of using sort of sort of simulations for senior leadership onboarding as well, which I think will be really crucial. That helps in saving time and also helps them to get really inculcated into the culture and the process of decision making, problem solving that really that we sort of operate out of. So these are a few cases, I think, but we're just getting started in this wonderful world of AI, and I think the time to come would really make us invest more and really have more such use case simulations that I can share perhaps in the future.
Yeah, great. Hey, Luke, how about you? I know obviously you have a product that drives in this direction, but
Totally.
maybe you can reference some examples of how your customers might be using it, right?
100%. And Tim, I think everyone's mind blown by your 1,500 simulations. There's Q&As coming in. What's your design time, investment in creating those? Everybody's like, Tim, what the hell? How are you doing so much? I'm sitting here with you. I love that though. I specifically love one thing that you said earlier, which is the time to learn. The time to learn how to do a skill is not when it's live, right? And the world is like this in a lot of other places. Yet for our employees, we sometimes just put them into the fire and say good luck, right? And whether that's with clients like Tim is talking about, we focus more on the internal stuff. And so our integration of AI into simulations has been in actually management training. And it's a wild to us that so many managers go into their first performance management conversation without ever having practiced one. It's wild to us that they go into a first feedback conversation without ever having practiced a feedback conversation. Maybe they sat in a session and learned a STAR framework or an SBI framework, and then all of a sudden they have to deliver that. And you're smiling, Rob, because we've all seen this. We've seen new managers go in and botch it. And so we went at this very much from the perspective of how do we build a world in which these conversations are happening? And then how do we set up the scenarios within that world for the practice to occur? Right. And so what I'll show later in our fast talk is I'll show you the world we've created around this. I'll show you the world where we've said, okay, you're managing simulated employees who actually have personas and they can respond to you like real employees would, but they're AI. So it's low pressure, but it's AI. And so they can give you feedback on how you responded to them. Right. And so it's a really exciting world building place. And again, I'll show you under the hood in the future. I know the question, though, was on the risk side. So I'll just throw two more out there that I didn't hear yet. Well, one I did, but the other I didn't. One is security. Security is front and center for all these things. I know my co-panelists are in financial services organizations, historically some of the most secure organizations out there. And there's a lot of questions from our clients about how secure is this? Where is my data going? What's going on? And I know these are things we need to work through. And then secondly, I'll call out pedagogy. Right. And this is because I'm a nerd. I know a lot of nerds on the call too, though, but pedagogy actually matters in this. It's not as simple as, okay, here, go to ChatGPT and practice, right? Like that doesn't do anything. It actually requires real deep instructional design, real deep thought about what are the scenarios, what are the moments that matter? And then once I have those moments that matter, how do I craft them in a way they're close enough to reality to be relevant, but not so weird that they're in the uncanny valley, which we see as well. And I know many of you on this call have heard the phrase uncanny valley, where it's a little bit too close, but it's a little bit off. And so I can't learn and I get a little bit freaked out as a learner. And so I think the two additional ones in our world building, in our simulation building that we've spent a lot of time on is security and pedagogy, and really trying to make sure we get to those moments that matter.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, we used to think about at McDonald's and when I was at Yum Brands as well, thinking about how do you create realistic practice, but make sure that the reality that you're trying to create isn't distracting from what you're actually trying to do, right? Because your limitations on technology or your limitations on your ability to create that realistic environment doesn't get in the way. So really interesting sort of perspective there as well. So I want to step back for a second and maybe reflect back for a second and thinking about, simulations in general have been on this journey. It's not a new idea, right? It's 20, 30, 50, however long, right? And NASA did it in the 60s. So we know it's at least that old, right? Thinking about simulations in general and how we use them in organizations. How is, like, I guess, generative AI and AI in general across the last couple of years, how has that really changed, game changed for you guys, how you think about your ability to leverage simulations, right? So it hasn't been talked a lot about, but I mean, it's like, so what difference is it really making for your organizations, I guess, would be the big question. Maybe Tim and Garsh, you could share a little bit about how it's really changing the way you think about them or how you apply them, or sort of a from to, if you reflect back 5 or 6 years ago and the way you think about simulations to today and how you think about it. How much has AI really influenced your thinking there?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. There's a couple of things. And Luke, you mentioned the chat. One of the 20,000 rules, laws, and regulations is I can't see the chat. I'm blocked as a registered individual. So, but we have been on a journey, and it has been a multiple-year journey. So first and foremost, we didn't flip a switch and all of a sudden you had all these simulations readily available. But what we have witnessed is speed to production has dramatically improved. The technology has become nimbler. It has become flexible. And what that has afforded us the opportunity to do is, in real time, using trends within our company, understand where we see opportunity, where we have challenges. Garsh mentioned fraud, risk, et cetera. Are there instances that we are seeing? And we can very quickly create a story for an employee to be able to practice. That is really powerful and meaningful, because Luke, to your point around instructional design, you really do have to be intentional about how you're creating these. But because of how nimble the technology is, you can do that really, really quickly. Another thing that I would say is scale. One of the biggest levers that we have seen with this technology, and we use AI, we use virtual reality, we use system simulators, et cetera, kind of sandbox environments, among others. But is just our ability to be able to, create those personalized experiences, which in turn delivers capacity back to managers and those that traditionally do coaching. So one of the biggest things that's been a lift for us is when you think about a banking or a financial services model, you have a very distributed workforce across many different locations, many states, et cetera, countries. And so when you think about traditional training, what we've had to do in the past is you might have to wait for your manager to come in to be able to sit down and actually go through a role play or a simulation with you, or you might have to practice with a peer, and you're hoping that peer is actually really good at it, because if they're not, then you're kind of practicing the wrong way. But what this technology has allowed us to do is scale and deliver that real-time feedback consistently, which allows us to then give capacity back to frontline managers for them to be able to practice or focus on things that can drive the business and support the employee in other ways. So those are just a smattering of the benefits, but I suspect that 12 months from now, if we were having the same conversation, I'd probably have 3 or 4 different examples with how fast the technology is evolving.
Yeah, I think about the value of role plays and the in pedagogy from earlier days of my career, and you're asking people to learn from people who are trying to learn at the same time. So while it's easy from a facilitation perspective to say, okay, pair up in the room and Tim, get with Garish, and you pretend you're the angry customer and you pretend you're the person trying to solve for it. Whether it gets solved the way you want consistently from an organization as a brand is still kind of left to chance. And I think, to your point, this drives a lot more consistency in application and approach as well. So Luke, you wanted to comment?
Can I add one thing to this, Rob, which I think is so interesting, and I love what you're saying there, Tim, is it inherently changes the role of the people around it, right? It changes the role of the facilitator coach, and it changes the role of the boss, right? Who sends their person to training. Historically, we said you went to the role play and then the facilitator coach saw you for 5 seconds and gave you some very high level feedback. Hey, you tried this, right? Well, actually in the AI generated world, it can actually give you that feedback. And then the coach can come over and say, hey, here's let me help you interpret that feedback. Let me help you action that feedback as a boss. right? It's a tool that is so powerful. And I'm like this is near and dear to my heart, but it's not unlike what happened in the early 2000s with the advent of the internet, where, at that point, information was held by a few small people. You had to go to your library to get information on applying for college. And all of a sudden it was all disseminated. And like, you could actually look it up yourself. You could go do it yourself. And the role of guidance counselor, the role of librarian, the role of all these things changed. And I think we're seeing a similar thing with generative AI, because generative AI is able to give that first level conversation, able to give that practice, able to give the initial interpretation, which is then allowing bosses, allowing facilitators, allowing coaches to actually focus on what matters, not doing these things that historically they're doing haphazardly, superficially, and learning while they're doing, like you said, Tim. So I think there's a sea change happening in the world of training because of this.
Yeah, for sure.
I think if I just add to that, I think there's been lots been said already. I think I could just talk about the challenge in terms of adoption, which has been like a big concern, and like what Tim mentioned, this didn't just sort of happen overnight, where we just sort of use the switch and then things started just rolling sort of automatically. I think the one of the challenges that we have to deal with is sort of adapting to change, where we're talking about still more and more people in the world saying, all right, when it comes to simulation, I really want a more immersive in-person experience. I really don't want to talk to a machine, which is still a mindset change, which is still there. And though I think people appreciate that there is technology available, there is sort of generative AI. I think the adoption has been quite slower to what we would perhaps anticipate. So that embracing this is, I think, is a challenge. And I'm yet to come across one clear solution in terms of really addressing this challenge. But I think the other side is that because of this, there is interest in terms of in terms of exploring different simulation platforms, investing in different digital learning platforms. So for example, Credit Suisse invested in this platform called Degreed, which is basically our digital learning platform. It's again backed by AI and machine learning. And though it's not the most intuitive platform in the world, it really gives you, it's a content aggregator, which means if you were to introduce any kind of AI-based simulations, people really go and check that out, which is good. So from having like a single digit adoption rate earlier to almost close to 85% over a period of time, over a period of a couple of years, really gives a signal saying that people are open to using using AI, or let's say generative AI. So for example, be it chatbots. The one thing I realized that people were not really open to using even chatbots for, let's say, tech service, or let's say using into HR shared services where people had regular questions and they really wanted to speak with a person. They were not really open to to sort of have that conversation, if I may say, with the chatbot. But that's changed quite rapidly. So I think adoption is definitely improving, and I think to Tim's point, in the next 12 months or so, this could really ramp up quite quickly, because just what Luke said, so that this is not the time of the internet, where it took still a longer time for people to adapt to it. This is quite rapidly changing. I also saw a question in the chat box where I think someone was asking about how to use simulation in on-the-job learning, and that's really been used quite a lot in terms of upskilling, especially when it comes to technology. So one is the knowledge part of technology, and second is the application part of technology. So I see a lot of use cases which are basically simulators, not limited to what we are using, but also available in the market, where people are using that, adapting that to really upskill themselves and sort of getting themselves certified. So those are perhaps a few things that I can add.
There's lots to the story here, I think, and that's the good part. And hopefully our group is taking away some actual use cases. So I appreciate the openness that we're getting so far in the conversation about how you're dealing with it. Luke, you mentioned, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because you mentioned it, Luke, but you talked a little bit about security. I'm curious, Tim and Garsh, and highly regulated environments and ultra secure places where people keep their money and those, and their transactions and everything else. How are you guys thinking about and or wrestling with or or working through sort of the security challenge of AI in and of itself, right? Because it feels like a bit of a black box to most of us. And I know there's lots of questions out there, probably more questions than there are actually answers at this point. But I'd be curious how you're dealing with that internally inside your organizations.
Yeah, it's a true challenge. And like I mentioned, at the pace with which this technology is evolving, there is a bit of trepidation until we really understand it. And so that is why I would argue we are using the technology in a way that works for us, but we are evolving with it as it continues to evolve too. And so from a security perspective, and I think that this is critical for anybody that's maybe exploring using simulations or introducing AI into their experiences, you've got to have an incredibly strong partnership with your technology and security folks. That is one of the biggest things that's been a differentiator for us, is that they are at the table with us as we are thinking through how we intend and how we would like to use AI. So that's number one. Number two, one of the things that we're really focused on is ensuring that we aren't using any sort of access to platforms, client data, client information, et cetera. So as an example, we've created profiles for fictitious clients and prospects to ensure that there's not any sort of way for that information to get out, be used, or impact any real client or prospect, which is critically important. And then the third thing that I would say is we are really trying to make sure that we understand where we could take this technology next, what makes sense for us, because it's not right for everything, but where do we believe that it can continue to have the biggest impact? And so I think we're still early innings on that, truthfully, in terms of where we go from here. I mean, I certainly have a list of use cases that I think could be possible, but it's, can we do that in a secure, safe environment for employees and for clients and customers? And then the last thing that I will mention here is we are not using the AI in a way with which we're saying, okay, associate, go out and practice using GPT. We are very intentionally using AI the way that we want it to be used, how we want it to engage with our employees, et cetera, because I think outside of that, AI can be a big, scary world. So just really think about how you want to kind of put the box around AI versus letting it be the full universe of capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. Garsh, anything to add there? I'm sure so.
Yeah,
There's some
just
similarities.
I think Tim sort of covered most of the part. I think the only thing that is, I would say, the way that we have looked at it is from a risk perspective, which is low risk, medium risk, high risk. And they said, let's not touch anything with high risk, which includes client confidential information or employee information. Let's just take that off the board right away. Let's gradually progress, and that's how we have looked at it, and that's really helped us to like what Tim mentioned, we have the data security team always with us. It's not like, the learning team is doing something different, and then that's how the way that we've been functioning. And the good part is that we've really done well with the low risk items, a few which I've mentioned before, and that's given us a lot of confidence, saying, people, we can use it. This is low risk. It sort of mitigates any kind of challenges from a data security standpoint that could impact us as an organization or as a bank. That's good. And we're doing well in the medium risk stage as well, where we want to look at empaneling more and more platforms that we could really use, like what Tim mentioned. They have a wonderful platform, so maybe a platform like that in the future, because when it comes to investment, there's a fair amount of time that we take as an organization to check all the boxes before we get into in that. So that's the way that we perhaps are looking at it, and then progressing step by step, which gives us time to even test, challenge ourselves, before we get heavily or just immersively involved in using generative AI. And that's where we are.
Simulating before you simulate. So yeah. Great. Luke, anything to add? I know you talked about it briefly, but like from a customer perspective, are there thinking from I'm going to sort of put myself in your shoes from a sales perspective. My guess is you're hearing questions from customers, particularly on the product side, over and over again about security. What are the common things that like people are asking about, and what would you share with this audience they should be thinking about?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, I think the security things are the exact same things that I've just heard from Tim and Gorish. When I look at it, our clients on the financial services and the healthcare have the highest level of data security concerns. And so those are the questions we're getting. And oftentimes the conversation we have is about defining what we mean and understanding how the technology works, right? Like it's a very big open box. It's like, what information are we actually sharing? Where is it actually going? What is going on, right? And so I don't have much to add from what they had there on the financial services side. In many ways, you all are ahead of the curve, and I see a really good thing happening of understanding and defining. The other place where I'll call out from, and it's kind of adjacent security, and it's coming up in a few of the questions as well, is, well, there's also a security piece from a learner safety side, because this is crazy things happen, right? Like this is the biggest Wild West we as learning developers have ever put people in. Oftentimes we put people in very constrained environments where there's very clear pathways that are happening. And I'll tell you, generative AI can go off the rails in many different ways. And I'll show some screenshots later of ways we've done it. And I think that piece, the security around learner safety and the security around making sure the product isn't doing things that are way outside of the frame of what you want, comes from giving auditability from the tech side, having visibility in terms of what's happening, being able to look back and say, okay, this is what happened, this is why, this is how we need to update it, and then creating a culture. You know, we work heavily with our clients when we bring this there to say, and Miriam, I see your question where it's like, yeah, AI looks great at 30,000 feet. When you look at the answers at 5 feet, sometimes they really break down. And to set the right tone of like, sometimes this will happen. We're on this journey together. Let's figure out how we make it better together. Let's give each other a little bit of benefit of the doubt here. It is really important when you're integrating new things like that. Because I mean, Morgan's talking about it right here in the chat about bias in AI. There are things that are coming up that are just out of our control. And that's both the magic and the fear when I hear these security conversations.
Yeah, I think also in recognizing it's still actually relatively early days in the big scheme of things in terms of where we are, right? Generative AI really burst on the scene, you know, sort of late fall last year. And, you know, we're barely 12 months into sort of it as a commercial use kind of scenario. So yeah, lots to learn and lots to still do, I think, in terms of figuring those out. So I appreciate that. So we can't get away with any conversation, and we only have about 13 minutes or so left, but we can't get away from any conversation without ever talking about ROI and learning. So I think that, so I would think about sort of, I want to frame my question sort of in two angles, because there's also a question about business cases, right? And people running into roadblocks from an investment perspective. So maybe you can share a little bit about how you sort of built your business case and then how you're demonstrating ROI or one or the other in terms of strength here. But I think, you know, the ROI conversation probably, you know, that could be a whole nother hour, I'm going to guess. But maybe just some brief sort of specific examples or, you know, sort of mind maps on how you're going about thinking about it would be great.
Yeah, you know, the business case is critical. And we started very small a couple of years ago in terms of really mapping out what we were trying to do and what we were trying to improve, which was some of the things that I mentioned: capacity, consistency, personalization, etc. We measure effectiveness of this platform a number of different ways. Some of them are very specific around the business impact that we are trying to have. As an example, and we've published articles about this. Last year, we launched a series of trainings across multiple modalities. Some of it was more instructor-led. We had iCoach, we had virtual reality, around de-escalating client conversations. So going back to some of those examples that I shared around, what do you do if a customer or a client is really upset over something? And how can you manage through that experience? We have measurements that show within our financial centers across the country that as a result of these trainings that we have seen improvement in terms of the number of escalations that we have to senior leadership, sometimes to law enforcement professionals, et cetera. So that's a real tangible use case where we've seen tremendous impact. But you have to think about it outside of just that, okay, metric A, we impacted by X%. You also have to look at it through the lens of the speed to proficiency that you're generating. In other words, what is the improvement that you are seeing when someone takes one of these simulations the first time and when they go back in the second time, third time, et cetera. And also, what is the confidence with which they can now execute on whatever experience or simulation that you're trying to get them to be proficient around. And so we do have measurements where we track, the improvement simulation after simulation. We also survey our participants where we ask them, how do you feel? How do you feel? Are you prepared for your role? Are you satisfied with the training that you've received? And if not, tell us why not. And we use that feedback to constantly evolve how we're thinking about these platforms and how we're improving the experiences as we go. So some of that can be a little bit harder, to demonstrate, within a business case to say, well, they're more confident or they're more proficient. But I do think it's incredibly important that you lean in there too, because it helps to tell the whole broad-based story.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I always thought about confidence translates into a sort of engagement, which translates into retention, right? So you can think about new hires that you've brought into the business that if we don't train them up, they get frustrated because they're not really sure how to do the job. It's all trial and error. They may or may not get it right, and they tend to turn over a lot more frequently as a result of that. So really interesting piece around confidence as well, right? From an outcome perspective. Hey, Garish?
Yeah, if I may just add to that, I think what I mentioned earlier, saying that the business case was really starting with something small, exactly what Tim mentioned, and for us it was the low risk part of it, which means that it's not going to impact, it's not going to make big waves, but it's going to impact a larger population than a smaller one. Which means, let's say, if we were looking at building a risk culture and the use cases and simulation that we used for building awareness and then augmentation is something that helped us to build that business case, saying, okay, so we are investing X right now, and we are looking at creating awareness and then going the step further where people have visible understanding, and that's one measurement. And we've done that through using employee engagement surveys, which is at a very fundamental level. But we've seen there's a correlation between adoption, how people are using simulations and they're getting used to it, which also has reduced the dependency on a lot of in-person, or let's say, when I say in-person as in virtual or in-person trainings. So that redundancy has been reduced, which means people are more and more saying, okay, I understand that I need to be more agile, I need to be more aware of things that I need to do. And that's really bringing a behavior change in people, which is quite evident in which is quite evident as demonstrated by the surveys. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is when you talk about the return of expectations, it sort of, you work backwards and say that, all right, if you're looking at even things like upskilling, where you want to develop certain, let's say, especially, let's say, leadership skills, we don't want to get directly into a talent development program. We don't want to get involved. We don't want to invest in, let's say, for example, external education right away. We want to use simulation to help you identify, or rather give you opportunities to get some of the fundamentals out and make sure that we are at the same level. And that's at a very basic level. But that's what giving us more confidence in terms of going back to the board and saying, okay, what's the next step? So we have two examples now: low risk, medium risks. That's working well. If tomorrow we need to invest, let's say, another, let's say, for example, 1 million or 2 million Swiss, then we now have cases that gives us confidence in saying, let's see, what is our check? We have got proof of testing and adoption check, security check to a large extent. Number 3, investment and onboarding of our senior leadership check. Do we have any parallel industry examples? And I think one such as Tim's what is talking about right now, and our, let's say, from our competitors to parallel industry. So we use market intelligence as well, and that's what's helping us building that business case as we move forward and sort of progressing. That's the other thing I'd like to add.
Yeah, really interesting, and love the approaches too. Maybe Luke, anything to add there?
Yeah, I love what these guys are saying. And at the end of the day, as a vendor, it's really important to us to actually align two metrics that matter for our clients. And so when you have a very sophisticated view, like say Tim laid out at the very beginning, it's a lot easier for us, right? Because we can say this training actually impacted dollars and it went here. The only two things I'd add is, because we work at manager and above level, and we work at the top talent level, the two, and I think you mentioned it, Rob, but like retention really matters. When we do the high potential program for Dell, for example, as one of our big clients, we have the opportunity to say, hey, these people were still here in 12 months. These people were still here in 24 months. And that's actually an observable piece of data that actually can help us with ROI type things. And then the second piece is we do a lot of work with professional services as well. And professional services, we do all onboarding for one of the big consulting firms. We did 8,000 of their new hires last year. And one of the big metrics to look at there is time to first paying engagement, right? And that happens to be an organization that actually measures things on an hourly basis. Well, some of them on a 6-minute basis, and has dollar amounts associated with it, and getting someone up to speed faster because you've actually given them practice in a simulated environment has a real measurable ROI. So as a vendor, it's just crucially important that we align to whatever is the metric that matters for them. And Rob, I look forward to in 15 years when we're doing this panel again, to have the conversation about ROI again, because all of us who have been in this field for a while have sat on the panels over and over and over and over again. And I love it. And we should be having that conversation.
Yeah. For me, 33 years of ROI conversation. So it's very exciting stuff to keep talking about it. But it's like a jail sentence some days. But anyway, it's good. So we only have a few minutes left. So I guess closing thoughts would be, parting thoughts, advice would be. And then I think in that context of maybe sharing like what's next for you, right? As you're thinking about the journey that you're on, like what are you exploring? Maybe might be a good sort of quick hit that we could go around and wrap up on.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. I mean, simply put, I think there's a tremendous opportunity that's out there for AI and other technologies, new and emerging, in training and development. We do think that we are just scratching the surface of what's possible here, and the speed at which we can generate content or develop proficiency with employees, et cetera. That being said, like I mentioned, it's been a journey for us. And so my advice to anybody that out there that's thinking through this for the first time, trying to understand how can I bring this to my company and really kind of sell the idea. I would tell you, find your use case. Don't try to tackle or boil the ocean, right? Find that one example that you can really hone in on, that you can implement, that you can measure. And I will tell you that when you share those results, business leaders will ask, well, what else can you do? Or they will say, well, could you also use this for this? And naturally, the business buy-in, the investment, et cetera, starts to follow from there. And I will tell you, phone a friend when you need some help, whether it's myself or Garsh or Luke, et cetera. Reach out to us, and we're happy to brainstorm with you around, potholes, mistakes, speed bumps that maybe you don't want to try to make. In terms of what's next for us, like I mentioned, we're looking at how can it help us to create content in a faster way? How can we start to think about professional skills, like a presentation simulator where somebody can be, as an example, certified to give presentations to teams, leaders, boards, et cetera. The possibilities are kind of endless there. So we're really trying to think about some of those professional skills that we can start to influence too.
Yeah, really cool, interesting ideas. I love that professional presentation simulator. So for sure. Garsh?
I think I'll just add that it's important to start small, exactly like what Tim mentioned, and you get, like I mentioned, you will get more confidence as you look at starting small, having a clear focus area. What do you really want to solve? What are you really solving? Is a question to ask, and why now? And what could happen if you don't do this? So if you answer some of these questions, it's a great start. It will help you define that business case and go with confidence and talk about if any investment is required. It also helps you to define the ROI or the ROE that we're talking about. So you have a simple case. The other thing that I would like to caution is that sometimes you can get caught up in over preparation, and that's what happened with me when I was really looking at, okay, let's check everything. Let's not go before we have a clear vision for 2 years. And we know in 2 years, a lot of things can change, right? So it's things change, things change overnight. So 2 years is a long time. So that's a caution I would say. Sometimes we get caught up in overthinking. So I would say keep things very simple. Start small and then you can progress, because I think the adoption part of it, I know I'm coming back to it. It's been a good teacher, because it's helped me to understand how the behaviors can change, how we can, it's sort of tapping into your emotional intelligence sometimes, saying, I do empathize with you, but we really need to use AI right now. We can't go back to the old methods. That I'm not saying they are redundant, but let's be progressive and be more futuristic that way. I think for us, the plan ahead is to gradually move in that direction. It's a slow process, which is understandable, because you got to consider many factors, including security, including appetite, in terms of what you really want to achieve. But I see that I think in the next 12 months or so, for us to sort of moving from that medium to a higher risk standard, where you really are, you've got more heads involved, and more eyes focused on saying, okay, we got the data security question answered to a large extent. Now let's like what Tim said, let's use in terms of getting people certified. Let's look at how can this really impact the bottom line of the business by, let's say, enabling simulations for our wealth managers or for our investment bankers, in terms of having more close to reality understanding and simulation that will help them prepare, especially for the new guys who sort of joining our organization as we're growing. So I think these are some of the next steps for us.
Awesome. Hey, Luke, I'm going to let you talk about your next steps in your 20 minutes, right? So, and in the spirit of time, we're going to keep things moving. But I want to thank my panelists today and for joining us, and for all of you for joining us. I know we have more to go here, but great start to the conversation today. And I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Thanks so much, Rob, and thank you all for so much for this conversation, and to everyone in attendance for your questions and engagement, and to all of our speakers for handling all the questions coming in the chat and whatnot so seamlessly. I appreciate it. I know people often find quite a bit of value within the chat function, and I did want to note once again that once the session concludes within the next day or so, we'll be following up with all of you, with all registered attendees, with a link to the recording of this entire event, as well as a transcript of the chat for your reference. So again, Rob, Luke, Gorish, Tim, thank you so much for this discussion today. At this time, I'm pleased to pass things over to Luke for his fast talk, a little less talk, a lot more action, and I will join you back here in a bit. So take it away, Luke.
Sounds good, Ashley. And can you hear me and see my screen?
Yep, it looks great.
Beautiful, beautiful. I have the chat up. I see people saying thank you. Thank you again to Rob, Tim, and Gorish for being here, and a happy birthday to Gorish. I love these things. I love sitting on the panels. I learned so much about this. And so please, thank you for being here, and thanks for spending your morning with me. Rob said I get to give the advice here. And so I'm going to give you a quick 20-minute fast talk. And what I'm going to tell you is be specific with your use cases. Be specific, and then tinker, 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 tinker. And I personally am a visual learner. I'm one who learns by actually doing. And so I'm going to show you the use cases that we're doing at Ability, right? So at Ability, just to reset our frame, we reimagine leadership development. We focus on mini MBAs, and we focus on building immersive simulations in the areas that new managers and senior directors need. So we focus on business acumen, people management, and cross-functional leadership. And we have 6 core simulations at which we've built leadership programs around. So we have ones around the business acumen side, teaching finance. I'll talk a little bit about those at the end. We have ones around the cross-functional leadership side, teaching actually cross-functional strategic leadership, how you step up in your career. And then we have ones at the people management side, where I'll spend most of our time, because that's where we've integrated AI. Because we're a simulation-based learning provider, we wanted to really think ahead and think about how we could integrate AI into our synchronous learning. And so here's the frame we gave. And I'll tell you as we go out there that there is more frames out there on LinkedIn than you ever could read in 1,000 years. And so my suggestion to you is find one that works for you to actually make the problem tenable, and then use it to find opportunities to tinker, right? And so what we look at, and we say there's a couple of different ways to integrate AI into synchronous learning. There's the asynchronous ways, right? There's the always on support tools, the things you see from the Khan Academies of the world. There's the ways where mentors can provide guidance on journeys, like Tim said with his 1,500 simulations. How do you know which one to go? AI can actually use it. You can use AI to actually send you to the right place. There's the ways to use AI as tutor, again, like Khan Academy does, where it's actually giving you instruction on topics. And there's ways to use it as interpreter, where it's saying, hey, I don't understand this term. Can you explain it to me like a 5-year-old, like a 5th grader, like a college student, and then like a pro, right? Those are the asynchronous ways, and they're really interesting ways. And I see a lot of cool stuff on LinkedIn, and so follow people on that. That's not what we do. We've focused on actually integrating it in the synchronous ways, in the practice ways, in the ways where you are actually practicing the moments that matter, to use the term that Tim said before. So we've used AI very specifically in 3 different ways. We've used it as a coach. We've used it as a way of giving feedback after you have a practice experience. How do you actually understand how you did? How do you get that first level of, here were the words you used, here were some different words you could have used, right? Like we talked about in the panel, an opportunity to then give you analysis and the feedback on what you're doing. We've also used it as a simulator, right? And I'll show you the simulator that we've created here. And I know we've had some questions in here about what those look like, how you integrate it. I'll show you exactly what we've done and what we're doing with our clients right now, right? And then we've used it as a teammate, as a partner, as a thought partner, when you're going through a simulated experience, to say, hey, let's push you further. Like a good coach would do, like a good teammate would do, pushing you forward into the learning. So that's the frame we've used. And to go at it, we then tested. We've tried tons of different messages. We've tried ways to partner with it. We've tried ways to make it give us feedback. We've tried ways to practice it in specific conversations. We've tested a bunch of different models. You can get analysis paralysis here. And so at some point, just go. Okay. And that's what we did. We said, we're going to actually integrate it into our management challenge. We're going to integrate it in a deliberate practice way and then build everything else off of that. And our management challenge is a tried and true scenario. We've had 20,000 learners go through it over the course of the last 5 years. We've had the opportunity to work with about 1,000 different clients on this. And so it was a world that we knew had power. It was a world where we actually had created an environment for people to practice management in the first place, but we were doing it largely through video-based conversations and through role-play-based conversations. And so AI was an opportunity for us to bring that to the next level. It was an opportunity for us to take that context we already had, take the personas we already had, take the scenarios we already had, take the pedagogy we already had, add in LLM trained models, add in a chat environment, and add in a user portal that worked to actually create moments that matter for our clients and give the opportunity for our learners to practice. Right? And so that's how we've gone at it. And that's the frame as I go out to in. We've gone at it, right? And so let me show you, because at this point I'm still abstract, but let me show you what that environment looks like. We've had this environment where we have simulated employees, simulated people who you as a manager are taking. And that's really important before you integrate AI to ensure that you actually have a sense for, okay, what is the world they're integrating into? So let me show you a minute of a video. And Ashley, I would ask if you could let me know if you can't hear the video, please.
There's nothing I like more than being in the room with my coworkers, brainstorming a problem and feeling those creative juices kicking in.
I intend to be an important person in this company, and the only way that's going to happen is if all the higher ups see all the good work I'm doing.
I haven't been here as long as the others, and I tend to keep to myself, professionally speaking.
The only thing I have control over is the quality of my work, so that's what I focus on.
I've already forgotten more about how this company does business than most of my colleagues will ever know.
I just wanted to make sure that I found a situation that was right for me, not just any old job.
I don't know, it's sense of humor and dreamy corporate logo. Look, I get paid for doing the kind of work that I like. Does it need to be more?
I just showed up one day, and nobody had the good sense to send me packing.
Well, I'm just re-entering the workforce, and it's really great to work for a company that gives people a chance.
Well, what I like about the company is it's so dynamic. Like, I was talking to someone the other day, and she went from associate to manager in 15 months.
So what we have there are personas. We have actual characters. We have storytelling. There was a comment earlier about Hollywood. And one of the things that I think is interesting about the AI world is that writers are going to be more important than ever because they actually have to flesh out the scenarios. They actually have to create them realistic to make them have value, right? And so we have those personas, and then I'm going to show you our platform. And then within those personas, we've created a platform for you to interact with them, you to interact with those people, you to learn more about them from their profile perspective, you to actually have a chance to think about yourself as a manager managing those people, right? And so we've built our whole portal around having an opportunity to do that, having an opportunity to think about your role as a manager. Where we've then integrated AI is we've then taken that and said, well, actually, there are moments that matter in which you can have this conversation with these personas. And so we've taken those personas and turned them into fully fleshed out AI characters that you can talk with and that you can practice with beyond the first level. And so we've created situations. Our first character who we talked about there and who you saw in the video was a character called Tamika. Tamika's a high-performing individual. She actually brings a tremendous amount to the team. She's been with the company for a number of years, and she loves to interact with others. The scenario we've created around her is the opportunity to think about, okay, what about if we're doing performance management with her? What if we have a performance review and our boss, the executive, has told us that she wants us to promote Tamika? We've then created it, and so it's embedded. And Tamika says, hey there, how are you today? I'm doing great. Ready to have a talk about your career? And I'm doing this live. This is live in our platform because I'm so sick of product demos that are screenshots and screenshots alone. I'm just going to do it live on here right now. So absolutely, I'm open to discussing my career. What do you have in mind? Well, I have some feedback for you and some good news. And what's really amazing is she starts to respond with some nuance, right? I'm eager to hear both your feedback and the good news. Well, first of all, you're being promoted. And I can text her. I can ask her questions. I can do this. I'm honored to be considered. I'm curious, though, with the new role. You'd be in charge of Patrick and Jim. It's exciting, isn't it? And what this does is it gives me an opportunity to actually role play a conversation with, in a first off, way that I can do it by myself, chatting with the AI. And secondly, get below that surface, right? And so I can have this conversation with her. And of course, we've experimented with and put in a lot of the accessibility tools where, okay, I can actually talk to it and I can speak into it and say, let's see, that's certainly any way I could contribute significantly. And I can have my microphone take it and I can say, hey, Tamika, honestly, it's time to take this next step in your career. Hey, Tamika, it's time to take this next step in your career. And I can have her speak it back to me. And so she'll end up speaking.
I appreciate your trust in me. However, I'm a little worried about how this might affect my relationships with the team. Is there another way I could grow my career without becoming a manager?
So you can start to see her subtly pushing back on me, a conversation that's really hard to have outside of a role play type of conversation. I see Amanda's question in the chat, and I freaking love that. How is the learner's performance measured, right? Sarah's asking what tech tools. I'm going to get into that. Don't you worry. I'm going to cut this conversation short, and I'm going to say, let's have lunch and talk about it next week. In our actual session, we actually set aside a good amount of time for a learner and their partner to actually have this conversation together, right, with Tamika. And what we find pedagogically is that doing it with somebody else brings more intentionality and thoughtfulness to the conversation. Yeah, Joy, it's freaking crazy. Tamika's incredible. I freaking love Tamika. And we've integrated things like this all over the place. I know, it's really wild. And now, Amanda, I think I'm going to blow your mind. I hope so. I don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Who the hell knows? I'm the head of product over here. So I try to blow people's mind. But I just had this conversation with her. And what we've then integrated on the back end is a button up here that you probably saw called Analyze Conversation. As soon as I press that, it actually tells me how I did. How is the learner's performance measured? It's telling me, okay, I did okay. I got a 5 out of 10, right? And then it gives me specific feedback, which is crazy. How wild is that? I just had this conversation and it's now breaking it down based on a rubric I gave it live that then says, okay, this is what you did well. And not only this is what you did well, but let me read this. On the motivator side, the manager could have performed better in understanding her motivators, applying Herzog's hygiene theory, or using insights from Daniel Pink's drive. Some probing questions could have helped find what was fulfilling. For example, you might have asked, Tamika, what aspects of your work make you feel most fulfilled and purposeful? That's giving me feedback on how I did and giving me suggestions about how to go. So what we do is we have this conversation individually. We then are often running this as part of a broader program. And I see some of our clients in the room, which is great. They've seen this. Running it as part of a program where there's 20, 30 people in the program. We then say, what are the themes that are coming out and how do we apply this to our environment? What are the places we need to learn? And Amanda, I'll let you read this. I don't know if that's cool to you. I saw some things coming up, but I hope that was kind of cool, right? It gives us some feedback, gives us some thoughts on where it's going, gives us some thoughts on exactly how we can do better. And I want to call out that because it's really, really unique to have the opportunity to have a role play, then have immediate feedback, and then, like I saw somebody say up there, the opportunity to try it again, right? And so the way we've set this up is you have the opportunity to try it again. And so I like to show the demo, even though it's a very short period of time, and I know we have much more to do, right? Just to show that it's actually working. And one of the things I always say, when someone says they've integrated AI, be like Deion Sanders and ask for the receipts. Be like, have you actually? Show it to me. There's so much crap on LinkedIn too. And so like, ask them what they've actually done and ask them to play around with it. And for any of people who want to play around with ours, feel free to connect me on LinkedIn and I'll connect you to a demo site, connect you to someone on our team. Now, what I want to do though is get underneath some of these. Kristen's asking about the technology program. Dolores is love Coach Prime. Let's go Buffs. I'm a big Buff fan these days as of 2 weeks ago. But let me show you what's underneath the surface a little bit here. Got the live demos. I pulled out some different types of conversations. You can see some here. I'll skip through those. I can see some of the actionable insights. Again, I've shown this a little bit, but it really varies based on how a participant does, what type of insights it gives. It always gives some type of actionable feedback, which I think is pretty magical and pretty cool. But what's beneath the surface? And let me show you some of the lessons learned, because I started this by saying tinker, 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 and tinkering implies failure in some ways, okay? So the first thing we learned is be precise in your situation. Be very precise. Make sure you lay out what it is. Make sure you lay out what you're trying to do, and make sure you lay out the context, right? We do a lot of world building, like I've told you all, and that world building actually creates the context for which conversations can be relevant, actionable, and good for practice, right? Our early lessons were that when we let it go too long, it started doing weird things. We said, okay, we're starting to have these really detailed conversations, and it started to look more like a back and forth. And we were experimenting at first in ChatGPT before we built our own environment. But what we saw was when we allowed the conversation to be too long, it would start confabulating. It would start getting confused. Things wouldn't go right, right? And so as much as those are corporate buzzwords that we all hear in PowerPoint slides all the day, doesn't make much sense in a conversation. And so we went and spent a lot of time saying, okay, what are the prompts we're creating here? And I'm going to show you some insights into the prompts. The prompts themselves are actually multi-pages long, right? Joy's saying to use the GROW model. Yeah, we have a bunch of different frameworks we integrate in. We have our core ones. And then sometimes with clients, we actually integrate in different ones based on what they need, right? Spring, I'll talk about the data on the back end in a bit as well. Awesome. So we got really clear on how we defined Tamika. We got really clear on what matters to her. We gave her personas and persona traits. We talked about her highly valuing teamwork, her social relationships being a strong motivator. We found clarity in language here was really important. We also found situational context was really important, right? We put in her concerns about losing connection with her team. If we'd gone through that demo for a while longer, she never would have accepted being a manager, even though we thought she was going to be a manager. And there's a big aha for a learner that, hey, just because I thought she would want that doesn't mean she wants that. We also put in some subtlety to her, which is kind of an interesting thing that AI allows for. We allowed her to say, you should respond without enthusiasm in a way that's both subtle and avoids confrontation. So we didn't want her to show immediately what her cards were. We wanted the learner to have to ask good questions to get there. We also found that there was need to give very clear constraints. So rather than saying, often do this, sometimes do this, we found that we would say, do not ever accept. Do not ever share the type of work you prefer unless you are asked specifically. This gave a scaffolding for a learner to learn how to ask good questions of their employees, right? We asked her to actually respond with questions often and try to confuse them. And that subtlety and nuance gives them the practice for before the first time they're in a performance management conversation. And then we built this rubric. A lot of the questions here around grow, a lot of the questions around these other pieces are saying, how do we measure it? Well, we actually built our own normative assessment on how we think it should be measured. And we work with clients to say, hey, sometimes it's a different thing. Sometimes we should use a different one. And we've integrated this and built our prompts in a way that we can integrate that and change how we think how the world's best manager would handle it. So we built our own rubrics, we built our own analysis, built our own conversation, right? And so we've really gone into the details, and the devil is in the details on these things, right? You've just seen the Tamika one, and that's a subtle conversation. We've done other ones where it's giving feedback. And so that character, Jim, who we saw at the end there, is a high flyer. And we created a conversation where other people are telling you that Jim is stepping on people's toes. I'm sure there's people who are in this panel who have had to deal with in their organization, folks who are young, want to be promoted, ambitious, and stepping on people's toes. And so we created an environment in which case we can actually have the conversation with him around feedback that he needs to be given. And so we've created it, and so we actually can have that Jim role play as well. And we've created an environment for setting up that scenario and then starting that conversation. With Jim, we weren't focused as much on the subtlety and nuance of the participant, of the learner asking questions. And so we built in, for those of you who are looking close, you can see it here. We built in him sharing his emotions. He's feeling curious. I have some feedback for you, Jim. We can see how when we react, his emotional state also changes. And we've built that into where he's intrigued. A lot of people are upset with you. And notice I'm mistyping a few things. It's actually pretty robust to this type of thing. And so I could go through this. I could analyze the conversation. I could show you how SBI shows up. But the meta thing I'm trying to show you is that we've created an environment. It's almost sentient, Joy. Trust me, it's confusing. It's scary, right? But we've created an environment where we can have real beyond first level conversations, where we can actually have those conversations. We can actually practice them in a strategic and intentional way, and then we can pull out from them. Right? And so for Jim, the rubric we integrated is SBI. We've integrated things. We've worked with clients that use STAR as well. We've worked with them that use all these different pieces. But our meta thing is we want people to be able to practice these moments that matter. And so we've created a world in which they can do that. From our learning and development side, and Ashley, I think I have 3 more minutes, so I'm going to go fast through this and let people ask questions because it's, Lord knows there's a lot of questions and there's polls. Can I do 3 more minutes?
Yes, of course. Take your time. We're definitely flexible.
Beautiful.
I'll be here when you need me.
Love that. As anyone on my team will tell you, when I get really excited, sometimes I forget about the time, as I'm sure a lot of people.
Okay.
But we've created a sandbox where we can rapidly develop, test, and deploy it. I know Tim was talking about 1,500 simulations. We've focused on a smaller number that actually really have resonance for our specific simulation worlds. And so we've created a sandbox where we can test it, right? Amanda's asking, do you ever have to tailor the content personas LLM to specific clients? To break those down, classically, we haven't had to shift the personas. Sometimes we have had to shift the content, particularly around the rubric and the analysis around what they're expected to use. right? I see some other questions here. God, great questions coming in, right? Setu is saying, how does it simulate emotions as people getting pretty iffy, defensive while hearing feedback? That's quite challenging for people managers to develop. Let's see. Well, let's do it. I'm disappointed in you, Jim. You really did a bad job. Let's see what he does. Oh, he's shocked. Uh-oh. Well, that's unexpected. Could you provide more details? You took credit for other people's work. Credit for Tamika's work. It might be over for you. And yes, we test these things. No, he did not. I know, Joy. This is crazy. They always do that. They always do that. I see. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. I did contribute substantially to the report, but I understand it was a team effort. How should I handle? How about taking a step back and giving the team time to welcome you into their fold again? So we can have these nuanced conversations. He's feeling committed. We're bringing him back. I think I did a pretty, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, Ashley. I did a pretty shitty job in that conversation. And so if I press this analyze conversation button, we can see that, hey, it's actually going through. You did well in addressing the issue at hand, but there were a few areas of improvement. Yeah, my communication could have been clearer. I didn't give a specific when and where. Dang it. I always miss that part of the SBI. You mentioned Jim took credit. I should have said, Jim, I observed. That's better. Yeah, you're right. The behavior is caused distress. And then it gives me an action plan here. So yeah, kind of wild. I take the coaching route. Yeah, Madan, that allows you to have that conversation when we have this type of thing. So yeah, we have a sandbox. We've created it. We've integrated it. We run this live with clients. It was our big push this year among a few other big pushes on the product side. But yeah, we wanted to build a system that could rapidly allow us to develop, test, and deploy, right? That's what we've done on becoming an effective manager. If anybody wants to demo it with us, wants to sit down with us and play around, we're happy to show it. The two other ones, and Ashley, I'll show them just a peek under the hood for what else is in the lab. The two other ones is we've created a world where you have a teammate when you're learning business acumen. We find that learning business acumen is really hard because unless you actually already know finance, you don't even know what questions to answer. And so we built it into our simulation, Building Business Intuition, which is our basic simulation for learning how basic financials work, the basics of revenue and cost, and the basics of decision-making. In this one, we built in a scenario where you are bringing your taco truck to a farmer's market and you're having the conversation and negotiation with the person who runs the farmer's market. Here's the really thing that I found really cool when we discovered this was we created hidden context in this simulation. And so we said, while you, the AI, are posing as John Fenwick, the manager of the farmer's market, secretly, you're actually a finance teacher and I'm your student. And so teach me as you go. Make sure I'm asking the right questions and make sure I get there. And so we've used it as a teammate. And then lastly, we've used it in our newest simulation, Influence, which we're so excited about. And we've run a couple of times and it's been a hit so far, which is a conversational dynamic sim. It's for senior leaders. And we put people into city councils of 5 people and make them build a town through the course of decision-making. And what's really interesting about AI in this one, totally different use case, is we've started to use it to analyze the conversation that are in the room. And so what you're seeing down here in the bottom right is like a Fitbit for a conversation. And it's giving a sense for who talked to who was effective, how did they talk, how did they direct their statements, what language did they use. And so we've used AI as a metacognitor on that as well. There's a lot in the research lab. My meta suggestion is try things out. Nobody knows an AI. LinkedIn is full of crap. LinkedIn's also interesting. I personally find I learn a lot on LinkedIn. But check the receipts. See what people are actually trying and actually try specific things for yourself, right? The devil's in the details on this, and what's true right now is going to be different in 6 months. So have a lab, create a structure, create a process for that, and then find specific use cases. We could not be more excited about the use cases we're using. We could not be more excited about integrating this into our management challenge. We've already seen how it changes conversations, how it takes role plays to the next level, how it takes conversations to a strategic place to where you can practice them before you're in the moment that matters. That's what we're about here at Ability. That's why we focused it, putting it into our management challenge. And we would welcome conversations with you about any of these things. I'll put my LinkedIn in there and you all can connect to me if you'd like. I'll stop sharing my screen. And again, if people want to play around with it, connect to me. I'll connect you with someone on our team and they're happy to demo with you. Whew. Okay, Ashley, can you tell I had my coffee this morning?
No, that was great. I loved watching that demo, and thank you for all the feedback in the comments as well, and all of the questions. There was one question that came in near the end, and I was curious about this too. Most of these, the AI was pretty agreeable. Does it ever get argumentative or rude? Chris asked, and I was wondering the same thing.
I have so many screenshots about the things that AI is doing. We haven't seen it get overly rude. We have seen it be extraordinarily pushy back at us. And we really do try, and this is why we created a sandbox environment as well. We really do try to test, and then build prompts that actually create an environment that we want. And so we actually do put in things like, don't be rude in this scenario, because we don't want it to be confrontational to that degree.
So interesting. Thank you, Luke.
We've also tried to do things like accuse it of things, and we've seen confabulations of things. I mean, the stories are endless, and I don't want to put them on a recorded thing.
Session.
way underneath the hood, but test before you deploy. Let me say that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. Thank you for the fast talk and for running through the demonstration and everything. At this time, I'm happy to hop back on and join you to kind of go through our third part of this session. We like to use this final 10-15 minutes or so to get a chance to hear a little bit more from all of you about the things that might be going on in your roles, your organizations, and just to give a final opportunity for more dialogue and sharing of ideas among everyone today. So we have a number of poll questions that we're going to share just to sort of spark some conversation. So I encourage you to participate in those. And obviously, we'd love to hear any thoughts you have around these questions as well as we go through them. So feel free to share, your feedback or thoughts in the chat. And I think we can go ahead and get started with those. And thanks for hopping back on with us as well, Rob. Okay. And then Luke, do you want me to read through these or do you want to? I'm happy either way.
I can do it. I'm on fire right now. Who knows?
Oh, sure. You're better at it than I am. You go ahead.
You're saying, slow down, Luke. You're talking too much.
No, not at all.
Let's see. What's your level of familiarity with AI and simulation learning? Let's see. Very knowledgeable all the way through to no prior knowledge. Let's get some answers in here.
And I would be curious what, among your client organizations, or what do you see in terms of familiarity level? Is it kind of across the board, or I know everyone's sort of starting from a different place.
I think most of what I see, and then I'll give it to Rob, is I see most people just getting started. And I see most people looking at a mountain in front of them and trying to decide how to take the first couple steps, because they know it's there and they know they have to do it, but they're just not totally sure. And I think that one of the conversations that we've really been really thankful to have is, okay, let's not think about the mountain. Let's not think about eating an elephant. Let's think about the first bite, and we can be part of that with you. Rob?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think I'm seeing sort of this convergence. There's a lot of noise, right? So it's very distracting in that context in terms of trying to sift through what you read, what you hear. Every other webinar, frankly, is about AI something. And so I think that there's a lot of noise in the system that's distracting for learning and development professionals, where it's like, oh, look at this, no, look at this, no, look at that. So I do think that, Luke's point, and I think what we saw, from our panelists, was about being intentional is super important. And honestly, there's probably an area where you actually want to be incremental as opposed to sort of jump into giant step change. Because there's a learning curve for the learning profession for sure. as well as a learning curve for the people in, that you're serving from that perspective. So it seems like just getting started. It looks like from these poll results that that's the case for sure, that people are getting there.
I think that's right. I think that's right, Rob. And it's I mean, one bite at a time. Incremental improvement will get you pretty far. Right? This is a miracle of compound interest. Ashley, you want to throw up the second poll? And Rob, I'd be curious your take. I hadn't shown you some of these slides before. You are like the expert at this stuff. I'm gonna read the question and let people know what they're answering, and then would love to hear your take on the fast talk I just gave. Does that work?
Yeah, sure.
So the next one we had was about what topic are you most interested in integrating AI into simulation learning? There's the management simulations, the financial simulations, the strategic simulations, the marketing simulations, the supply chain simulations, the teamwork simulations, or other. So as you're listening to Rob talk here, maybe throw in the ones that you would find most interesting. And I'd be curious if there's resonance in the group. Rob?
Yeah, I think for me, looking, watching your fast talk and listening to what's going on, I think that, the management development component of any business in any industry has been a persistent challenge for, years and years, decades, right? I can literally remember late 1980s conversations about frontline leader development at Dun & Bradstreet. And I think that, this is sort of a new, presents sort of a new frontier of opportunities for people that really takes things beyond sort of the e-learning simulations or the classroom role plays that I referenced earlier when we were talking, those kind of pieces to be, one, I think that, we talk about social, but I think also the privacy of the practice piece is also pretty important as well, in terms of being able to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, not worry about being embarrassed in front of your peer group, and sort of build yourself towards a position of competency. So I really like that piece. The conversational piece, and I think is super important for people because that presents sort of a realistic opportunity to practice, which I think is what's missing in the past. And from a design perspective for us learning professionals, it's been too cumbersome to really sort of think of every possible branch response that somebody can give, or we default to like choose this answer, or this answer, right? So you have very sort of finite branching sort of pieces. So I think this opens the door to a much newer opportunity as well. So I'm excited about that.
I agree so much, Rob. It's such a good point. And Ashley, it looks like you just put them up there. It looks to me like management simulations are really high. Teamwork simulations are very high. And then and I see in the chat, a lot of stuff around call coaching, a lot of stuff around sales, a lot of stuff on point of contact type pieces. And Rob, I think that's particularly important because AI will allow some of the subtlety of those conversations outside of the old world of here's 3 potential choices. Okay, A looks pretty obvious. B and C look pretty shitty. Or they're all so subtle, who the hell knows? I'm just arbitrarily picking.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm really interested in sort of generative AI solutions for learning sort of at the moment of need.
Yeah.
Right. So, I see the audience in the polling around management development, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But, somebody asked about sort of technical training components and pieces like that. And I think it's a little early to see how that's actually going to happen. But some supplier, which I believe a lot of this will be supplier led in terms of application, will figure out how to sort of move towards a more technical training kind of focus, and how to sort of provide real-time feedback in the moment of need where someone doesn't know how to do something, or someone does something in a system and it'll check it and say, are you really sure you want to do that? Because that doesn't usually happen, kind of thing. Or the consequences of that choice might be different than sort of outcomes that are expected. So I'm very interested in those kind of things because I think, believe it or not, they can actually eliminate the need for training, which I've always spent 30 years of my career trying to do, which never actually happens. So interested in the other. I check the other box.
And then, Rob, we just have to make sure we have a place where we can unplug in case it goes all HAL on us, right? And
exactly, yeah.
I'm sorry, Dave. Are you sure you would like to do that?
That's right. I can't. Yeah, I can't let you in from outside. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dave. I am not allowed to do that. For those of you who are too young, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Make sure you see it. It's a really weird movie, though. Ashley, you're up.
If you watch the last 30 minutes, you kind of get what people are worried about with AI. So
let's see, Steve, I think we can run that next poll question. There it is.
So what's the primary reason you're interested in AI and simulation learning? Is it about enhancing learner engagement? Is it about improving learning outcomes? Is it about reducing education costs? You know, we didn't talk as much about that, but it's really interesting how that could do it. Is it about exploring new technology trends? And this is a forced choice, so you can only pick one here. I have conflicting ones here. Rob, you've been a CLO. Where's your head on
well,
this?
well, I think like ultimately you always want to go for improving outcomes, but I do think that there's, they're all right answers, I would say, but I think that there's probably gradations of sort of right answers strategically from a business perspective. You'd always be going for improve. Like I'd always say, I want to learn, I want to improve outcomes. Instructional designer might be on this call because they're exploring and it's not a familiar area and they're really trying to gain some new knowledge on it as well. Right. And so I think that they're all kind of right answers, I think is probably the perspective in which you're thinking about it as you go forward with it.
This is why you're the head of the panel, Rob, and I have to come in here and I have to go.
There you go. Yeah, probably just skew the outcomes, but yeah. It is interesting that reducing education costs, nobody picked that one because I do think that there is that component of the conversation. And so no slight against ability because I actually have no idea, but the cost of building simulations in the past has not been inexpensive.
Yeah.
And so, so I think that's part of the contributing factor around their sort of limited use.
Yeah.
So I do think that the ability to create 1,500 like Bank of America demonstrated, right? Or, as Tim mentioned, his ability to, do them much more quickly and more efficiently is actually about a reducing costs part of the conversation that's in there as well.
I think you're so right, Rob, right? Like in my world before Ability, I was at McKinsey and I was building McKinsey Academy, which was our client service learning and development arm. And the stuff we did was really incredible. We would build simulations custom. We would have executive coaches on the ground who would actually help executives at the moment of need. We had all this stuff and it was really expensive. And yep. I personally loved my job there. I loved the stuff I got to do. What got me so excited about coming to Ability was the fact that we could democratize that. We could come up with a world where actually using technology like AI, things like executive coaching and immediate feedback were accessible to all. Using simulations that were like, hey, that had personas that resonated, that weren't your exact environment, but were close to your environment, and you could use it and understand and apply the learning, would democratize it. And so, I mean, I feel very fortunate with the work we've been able to do to standardize things and make this more accessible. Because like Miriam said, AI solutions can be really expensive. Custom solutions, bespoke solutions can be really expensive. And it matters because a training that happens is better than a training that doesn't happen. Yep. And at the end of the day, that's a core piece. Ashley, should we move to 4?
Let's go. Sure.
Okay. So it's when you consider integrating AI into your simulation, what method are you most interested in exploring? And I brought these up earlier, but I was thinking of it as AI as mentor, an async, and I used some learning language here because I assumed we had a sophisticated audience, and the chat has proven that out for me. Async being asynchronous, and you're connecting with it by yourself and interacting with it by yourself on your own time. So AI as mentor, providing guidance on picking relevant learnings. AI as tutor, direct instruction. AI as interpreter, an always on lookup with familiar materials. AI as coach, prompting metacognition and encouragement. AI as simulator. Oh, metacognition. I put that word in there, but wow, what a word. I think I stole that from Ethan Malik. And if you're not
looking it up right now. So.
It's really, you're looking it up. I wish I had an AI as interpreter so I could say, explain metacognition as a common five. What would that look like? AI as simulator, provide deliberate practice during a session, and then AI as teammate, integrate AI into the work to be done. Or as always, our other. I'd be curious where people's heads are.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it gives you a use case perspective. So
I also, as we look at this, really want to call out Sarah's comment here. The learners I work with are overwhelmed by the body of knowledge they need to master. So I'm interested in how AI can help guide studying and match learners. This is the unintended consequence of AI. When the cost of content production goes way down, and Tim talked about this a little bit, I can create more scenarios, create more things faster. The actual need to have a way of navigating it becomes much more valuable. Right. And this is the secondary effect that AI is going to have to be used for, to help learners actually understand what's needed. And I think the common theme here, we're hearing it from Rob as well, is like, how do you get what's needed to people just in time?
Looks like we have the results up here too. Oh, Steve, can you put them back up? I just missed them. There we go. Thank you.
Looks like simulators
What's that, Rob?
Simulator seems to be the winner here, right? And I think that makes sense. I mean, most of what we talked about and most of what what we talked about in our panel was around sort of deliberate practice, right? As that piece, and then maybe some of these other pieces are still coming.
Yeah.
Right. Tutor, direct instruction, particularly in the flow of work, would be really fascinating. Those kind of things.
I think we probably have a little bit of survivor's bias too. Anyone who was interested in my stuff stayed. Anyone who wasn't was like, see ya.
Yep.
2 more questions. Let's get them out there. In your opinion, what's the biggest challenge in implementing AI-driven simulations into a corporate learning environment? Technical complexity, ethical concerns, lack of teacher training, or limited access to technology? You see, cost isn't in here, Rob.
Yeah, I know that. I don't think it's the most difficult. It just needs to be talked about.
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing. Chris is saying cost would be their concern. Chris, what organization are you coming from? Just so we know the frame you're coming at. I love these chats. People are coming manufacturing. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, it's always nice to have a lot of people participating in the chat. It's nice to get so much feedback.
Yeah.
It's like we have a good answer. Technical complexity is the top from this group.
Yeah, not surprising because I think of where we are on the curve of understanding. Right. Yeah. It's sort of magical at this point a little bit, but yeah.
Data warehousing and IP concerns from Thomas.
Yeah. I love that.
This is my favorite one.
Yeah, I love this final question.
AI in corporate learning is A, all hype. I've seen this before, and the hype cycle will pop. B, overhyped right now, but we'll come back to earth and marginally change things in the next 5 years. C, interesting, and I have no idea where it's going. E, hyped about right. This is really going to change things in the next 5 years. E, underhyped. This is transformational in the next 3 to 5 years. F, I ran out of letters. I think I'm at F. F, vastly underhyped. It's going to transform everything in the next year. This, I'm fascinated where people's heads are.
Absolutely.
Where's your head, Rob?
So it depends on the conversation. So some part of me is I've seen this before. So I was fortunate to be around when desktop computers arrived on workers' desks. Believe it or not, if you can imagine a day before laptops. And so, that was going, there's even newspaper articles I've referenced when I've talked to other companies about this, about, how it was going to change everything. I've seen the internet and the birth of the internet and the .com boom, where that was going to change everything. And, suddenly get groceries delivered to your house. And suddenly that wasn't really financially viable, at least at the time. Right. So some of these things I think are, it's hard to say. Is it going to change things? My opinion is yes. The hype of it is probably less important.
And it looks like we have our answers. Ashley, you want to interpret them?
0% all hype, which I think is, I would agree. Overly hyped right now at only 7%. It looks like mostly hyped about right. This is really going to change things in the next 5 years. 19% at underhyped and 4% at vastly underhyped. So it's kind of spread out, but definitely about half in that just about right area.
Yeah, not surprising.
It'll,
You know, we've lived through a lot. We've lived through the internet, that
Yes.
series of interconnected tubes that all of a sudden changed everything about us, right? All the way to crypto, which
Yeah.
I don't know about you two, but it hasn't changed my life at all. And I live in
No.
San Francisco. So
No, and I think, I think the learning profession as a whole has been attracted to shiny objects in the past. And so I think that that's why this is probably a fair question to ask. Is it really a shiny object, or is it actually something that could be transformational? And it seems early, but it also seems that people are beginning to find ways for it to be really transformational. Content generation is a good example. Your demonstration is a good example. Those kind of things are starting to emerge. And I think 12 months from now, when the supplier community comes out with 30 new products that weren't even technically possible before, it'll be very interesting to see how people adopt those and, sort of transform from what they are doing currently to what's possible in the future.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. But if there's anything else, Rob or Luke, that you want to add before we kind of close things out, definitely have a few moments to do so if you'd like.
My only comments would be that, thanks everybody for joining us, especially the 50 or so of you that are left and have stuck it out for the 2 hours. So I really appreciate the investment in your time. And then my only other observation from this is that it's sort of personal, right? I think there's a lot of sort of internalization that we all have to do at an individual level about what's possible. And then I also think that it's also about and dependent on the organization and the environment that you work in. So I know I saw comments about manufacturing or about technical skills or about management or about professional services. I think that, a lot of what's happening, what we talked about today, is different in context in each of those places. So really some reflection on some of the themes that came out of today around good use case, start small, build incrementally, build adoption in your organization as opposed to trying to sort of sell the whole idea up front, I think are really important themes that can be applied universally. So go for it.
Thanks, Rob.
Rob, you took all my talking points. So I'm just going to say thank you to Rob and thank you to Ashley for running this with us. I personally love that we're in this time of creation. We're in this time of tinkering. We're in this time of change. It's scary as all hell. There's security concerns. There's change. There's a mountain of time in front of us. And I think that what makes me so happy when I'm at a panel like this, when I'm at a talk like this, is to know there's a whole community building together. And so we as Ability would welcome the opportunity to talk with you, whether you're a learning designer, whether you're a head of learning at an organization. We are doing what we think are pretty cool things. We try to build in public and try to show you what it is and try to learn together. And so please do reach out to me, reach out to our team. I think someone put in the chat a play session we have coming up. I personally love learning what's going on out there, love sharing what we're doing. And so thank you to you all for coming. A special thank you to Ashley for running the event. And then Rob, it's been a pleasure to work with you over the last couple of weeks as we prepared and then ran this thing.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely. I appreciate you both being here today, and a thank you to Tim and Gorish as well. And obviously a huge thank you to Ability. We're so thankful for your partnership, your support of this event. It's always honestly just a joy to work with you. And Luke, I could take some speaking tips from you. So it's always great to be in conversation. As I mentioned earlier, you will all receive an email in the next, I believe, 24 hours or less, where we'll share a recording of the event today, a transcript of the chat, post-event survey, and certification codes as well. So keep an eye out for that. I do have a few brief housekeeping notes before we conclude. We invite you to join us for our next Breakfast Club event, which will be held September 26th, titled Navigating the Contemporary Learning Ecosystem. You can register for that event and all of our Breakfast Club events at 2023breakfastclub.com. Additionally, our 2023 CLO Symposium, All Eyes on the Future, Building a Culture of Lifelong Learning, is only 1 month away. It's kind of unbelievable. The symposium will take place October 16th through 18th in San Diego at the beautiful Rancho Bernardo Inn. Registration's filling quickly, and the final date to secure a room with the hotel is September 27th. So I do encourage you to sign up soon if you're planning to attend. I hope to see you there. We have so many exciting things planned for the event, from numerous keynote and education sessions to both of our CLO awards ceremonies and so much more. So we're really excited to be together again in person. And you can register at closymposium.com. So I hope I'll get the chance to meet you then. In closing, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you all again very soon. And in the meantime, on behalf of CLO, I wish everyone a wonderful start to your autumn, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.